thank you all for being here. So every month, we bring an artist to the gallery for the academic year, and they do an art for lunch artist talk, very casual talk about the art for the gallery. There'll be types of questions after a while of talking, however you want to do it. And then we have the opening reception tomorrow, so if you're able to come to that as well. But Daniel Scott Murphy is a Wichita-based photographer and cinematographer who specializes in creating media for the music arts. He has directed several music videos and has also directed a few short narrative films. He began shooting still photography in 2007, and in more recent years has focused on cinematography. Daniel currently works for Newman University, where we all are, as a web developer while being most visible around campus with a camera in his hand. He is also an alumnus of Newman, having earned his MBA in Business Analytics in 2018. Please join me in welcoming Daniel.
All right, let's calm down, So thank you for being here. It's an honor for me to display my work here. I worked at Newman since like 2013 and seen plenty of very prominent artists kind of come and go, and I just feel very humble to being able to have the opportunity to display my work here as well. So this is a very proud moment for me. So thank you for all being a part of this. I encourage you to come back tomorrow. I'm bringing a lot of my friends here tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have a big party and we can celebrate together again. Kind of relive this moment. So anyway, this is my day for night study, and I wanted to make this more of a study than just kind of like a best hits of Daniel Murphy stuff. So I wanted to challenge myself to do something that's still in still photography, but something that I can learn as a cinematographer. And one of the things I thought of is like, well, day for night is often being used in cinema, but why can't I use that in still photography and in a way that I can learn a little bit more of how it's done and study the greats in cinema to see how they've applied their technique and how can I apply it in my stills work and then transfer it to a smaller scope with some of my film projects. So that was kind of the aim from this, is just really to kind of learn from this and then present my findings to the Newman community and beyond. But before I kind of get too into it, you might mention, or I might mention my middle name is Scott, as it shows here. I got my middle name from my uncle Scott, who lived in Cleveland, Ohio. He passed away yesterday, and so I want to dedicate this study to him in the family name. So he was a great uncle, and I just really want to remember him in my heart by just kind of saying where my middle name came from. It's also my business name, Daniel Scott Films. So I just kind of I think it's just kind of rolls off the tongue a lot better than just Daniel Murphy. I don't know. It's one of those things. But yeah. So my middle name is Scott. Uncle Scott, love you, bud. So let's go ahead and talk about some cinematic examples. So. The history of Day for Night goes a long way back to like Casablanca, where they didn't have all of the digital advantages that we have today. And a lot of times it wasn't always practical to shoot during the nighttime. So having to learn how to shoot during the day was a necessity and not necessarily an aesthetic preference. Back in the day, the sensitivity of film was not very great, so you couldn't just shoot at nighttime and expect those details to show up in your film. So a lot of times it was just to see the image. It wasn't. These days it has like a preference because like maybe it's just more convenient to shoot during the day than it is for night, and so there's many factors involved. But I think for back in those older days, it was just a matter of just because you couldn't see, like we have the low light of cameras that we have today. So a lot of there's some disadvantages of the old school ways of doing it. So if you wanted to shoot during the daytime, there's no stars out. There's the back backdrop of the skylight was a lot lighter than the foreground, which kind of gives that illusion away. But there are still some other techniques that they could do. They used like kind of a blue filter that they would put over to kind of reference the illusion of night. But I think that with modern days technology, we've come so far. And so there's 3 modern films that I want to say, just kind of go over real quickly to kind of show what techniques that were used. So one of them, the first one I'm going to talk about is Dune. Raise your hand if you've seen the first Dune movie, the recent one. It was 2021, I believe. It's a really great film. A lot of work went into it. A lot of science that kind of goes behind it. But I was actually surprised to realize how simple it was. Now I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is very, very dark. I draw references because those of us who've watched like Game of Thrones, it kind of got blasted as being too dark. It's because it was really, kind of colored in a way, day for night. It was actually shot in day and developed for night, but it was the contrast and the exposure levels were brought down in a way that is more, the illusion is more sellable when you're actually in a movie theater because the darks are actually, you can see a lot more details in the dark, but if you're just watching it home on your TV, it's not going to have the contrast, So, but especially for Dune, you hardly see, you can probably see this a little bit better here, but you can kind of see this horizon back behind here. And some of the other things is like, you notice like they actually had to paint in a silhouette of these characters, to kind of reference the contrast that would, indicate that there's a brighter light source behind them. But just simply using some polarizing filters to make the sky darker and just simple color grading, So there wasn't, I'm sure that there was a lot more VFX behind that because with motion picture, you're also moving. And so any artifacts that you have to put into the frame, you also have to track that with your foreground. And so I thought it was really interesting, but honestly, really surprised about how easy that process was. So now I'm going to go, skip to the next one, which is Mad Max Fury Road. And this is a little bit more prominent. So this is a before and after, after and before here. So this was shot during the day, and this is edited to look like night. They actually took a lot more aggressive color grade with that to kind of, but it's also a story that takes place in a different world. So we can also forgive or actually expect something a little bit different, than what we were traditionally used to as day for night. So their process for here was to overexpose it by 2 stops, barely giving enough detail. So when you, in post-production, when it's graded, you have a little bit of detail in the lights, So in doing so, you preserve a lot of that detail in the darks. So, and that's just kind of very similar method to Dune, just a little bit different of a color grade process. Now, the third film I want to talk about briefly is Nope. How many people in this room have seen Nope, Jordan Peele film? Just a couple hands, okay. Oh, well, you guys are in for a treat. I think it's really an underestimated movie, especially in regard to the technical wizardry that went behind the scenes. So you can barely see this. Because of it's printed on paper, you don't really get to see some of the details in the clouds here, but there's a horizon here, but the sky is actually a lot darker than there would be otherwise if they didn't use a particular method. So this is the before and after, but there's a lot of composited stars, the clouds, and I will say that with this movie, like the sky is actually kind of a character in the sense of the movie. I don't want to go into spoil it for you, but just know that they had to spend extra time to get the clouds and the sky right for this film. So I really appreciate some of the extra work that they've done. So instead of just using just a blue filter, glass filter or thing, or doing the color grade in post, what they did, I'm not sure why I have 2 copies of this, but so what they did is they filmed this with 2 cameras. So this is a digital camera pointed up vertically, and And this is a film camera, which is pointed straight ahead. Now, there is a mirror that goes diagonal in front of this camera, and it's called like a beam splitter. If you have done, kind of like, if you've seen those beam splitters, like seen a politician talk in front of like kind of like, I forget what's the word for it. They have like the words that show up, That's essentially a beam splitter because it's reflected up and then through them, but the camera could see through it. I know, it's kind of hard to explain, sorry. So there's a 45-degree angle mirror here. It's one way. So this camera is reflected 45-degree angle forward, and then this film camera is actually passed through there. And so this camera on the bottom here captures infrared digitally. And does anybody know how infrared is captured or what infrared sees differently than a normal camera?
Is it the body heat?
That's right. So it captures heat signatures. So things in the foreground that's a little bit warmer because the reflection of the sun off the ground is going to be like white, and then versus the skyline behind it, it's almost going to be black because it's real cool and it can't really pick up any heat from the background. So infrared is a technique that you can really use to kind of separate the background versus just finding the horizon line and photoshopping or kind of selecting that and making it darker. So it's a much more natural process. However, one thing that amazed me that to get that perfectly done is that these two cameras have to be perfectly aligned on top of each other. These both have the same sensor size essentially, because this is a 65 millimeter digital. This is a 65 millimeter IMAX film camera, which I think is really interesting. And this records the color, naturally, and that just records the infrared. So in doing so, you can easily mask out the skyline or anything that's cold essentially. So I thought those processes were very interesting. Now, what I have learned from this is that I can't afford to do the version of Day for Night. So I had to resolve to using more of a traditional, what was done on Dune or Mad Max Fury Road. So, but I did use a couple of different techniques that it's kind of hard to do with film, with a motion picture, I should say, is that some images we're taking with different exposure brackets. So my meaning, this one right here, this one is called Wichita Skyline from a garage. The interior of the garage was captured at one exposure, and then the horizon of the cityscape was captured at a much lower exposure. So I can capture the detail of not only just the city, but some of the sky, so I can use it to separate everything else. So that was kind of merged into one, but then also doing a color grade over the top of it. Using selective processes like this light right here brought the exposure down so I can capture some of the detail around, like these bolts that were kind of holding this light panel in. Adding diffusion around that light. Actually compositing lights into these city buildings, which didn't exist during the day, because anyway, it's obvious reasons. So there is a process for compositing a skyline, adding stars, adding clouds. Let's take a look at this one right here, featuring our one and only Mark Minette, and I had a friend help me out here model this also. So the clouds in this frame did not exist at the time that the models were shot, but the clouds were actually there earlier, and so I used the same frame and everything, so I was kind of lucky to actually have the clouds pass earlier, that I can use that same frame to add the clouds, and then composite stars over here. And then, by the way, the stars were composited from an image that I took of a night sky, like probably about a year ago, and then so I was able to kind of use that. My goal was, or one of my challenges to myself is I didn't want to use any stock photography for compositing, so I wanted to use my own assets. If I didn't have something, I'd go out and create it. This was kind of a really neat. This was shot in what time would we do this? About 4 o'clock on a Saturday, out in Old Town. Had to find the right location that might kind of sell the look of Jack the Ripper in old time, like 1890s London. But I think it kind of comes off. So I did add a little bit of light down below. I actually shot a strobe. We used I used a strobe for a couple of different places, but it was just like one speed light strobe that was used as a key light from the front, and then I moved that strobe and kind of had them stay still. Then I moved that strobe to the back and then shot, and it kind of gave this little bit of like a backlight along the edge there. And then also another strobe that was kind of a little bit further back to kind of be more in line with this. So I have all these different layers. I have the clouds, I have the stars, I have 2 different photos for the different light position, or 3 photos for the different strobe light positions. So in post, I'm able to mask out what I want to show. So it's like you start with a base image, and then you kind of slowly reveal and kind of play around with it. Actually, there was a couple of different variants that I used for the backlight. The first one I worked with didn't quite work out so well, and I had one that just kind of had that backlight a little bit lower to kind of, it was more in line with this lamp. So I thought it turned out really good. And I think that's about it. One of the things I learned through this process is that at first, let's take a look at this one right here. This is actually one of the first day for nights that I did. And I have heard from other cinematographers and photographers that to capture day for night, especially if we're using like a lantern, that you should expose your color temperature to a more cooler temperature, and then use like kind of a warm gel over your flash to create that warmth. While I do like the way that this turned out, it was a struggle to get the colors the way that I wanted it to look. Honestly, I probably would have kind of wanted a little bit more desaturated look to it. But I found that of my exposures, like exposing to normal 5600 Kelvin is kind of like the standard daylight warmth that you would get, or take a normal photo with, gives you a little bit more latitude to kind of still present or add some blue to the shadows and the highlights, but yet it kind of gives you a little bit more latitude to keep the natural colors that are in the image instead of just fighting it. So it's one thing I found, and also to reserve the saturation levels. So, and I found that as I was progressing, this was one of the last shots that I did, and I found that I prefer a more natural look to be that of a more desaturated look instead of pushing the blues. And there's a little bit of greens in there too, but anyway, I think that's something that worked for me. So anyway, so that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to open up the room for questions.
Incredible shot that you've done on those buildings, especially I'm looking at that there, the building there, of course, the range silos, and the one with the train for that guy. It's just incredible. So you used a very fast shutter speed on those. What lens did you use to capture those?
Most of these were either like a 50 or 25 millimeter. I'm a big fan of shooting wide. I think it also makes sense if you want to incorporate the sky, to kind of show off the sky. That's part of the illusion. Versus if I were to just take photos of, kind of like a city scene, but didn't include the sky, it's hard to kind of sell the illusion without knowing, hey, there's stars up in the sky, or, anyway. So that was kind of my goal, is to shoot wide enough to give some presence of the sky.
Were the moons added in post, or were you able to capture it during the day?
That's a very good question. Yes. So if you were to, by the way, if you scan this QR code, you can kind of see the before and after. So that's what these QR codes aren't here for. So this one's really interesting. So scan this one. You'll see that the sky is bright blue, kind of almost like a teal color. There's no stars, no moon, and so but I think, and I really don't like adding moon because I think it's kind of cliche. You're like, hey, it's a day for night, let me throw a moon in here. So I didn't want to do that to all my images here. I just like only on select images where I thought that it might make sense or make it look interesting. So, those photography purists out there, of course I didn't add a moon in here because the moon wouldn't be visible with the day shot to get the contrast that I need here. But also you'll notice that the angle of the shadows doesn't match where the position of the moon is. But who's to say that there isn't some big street lamp over here illuminating the light from this angle? So that's my cop out of that one. So it's a good question.
Yeah, speaking of, I'm curious, this piece over here, the light source behind, were you using the sun in that case?
So that is the sun. That is not I did not Photoshop the moon behind that. So that's the only one that actually shot sun with. If the sun were prominent in the sky, it would be very difficult to make it look like the moon and not real. But that's what the one exception in all of these. That is actually a real sun peeking behind it in color to make it look like it's actually backlit by the moon.
Sure. Well, I also like because you've got the two windows where it almost seems to be catching some of the light coming through on the second story.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of compositing just. And I didn't, it's just kind of messing with like the kind of the contrast and adding some color and playing with the composite type for the layers to kind of get the right color. If you make it look too bright, it just kind of doesn't look right, So it's really is just an experimental process and just kind of seeing what works and trying to step back and like, is that believable? That there was a light illuminating from the inside. So, yeah, I mean, with this one over here, I spent a lot of time just kind of zooming, and painting like these lights that are off here in the Epic Center building. Is that what it's called? But yeah, like trying to that's too bright. Like, there's no way from that distance that the light would be that bright. So there was I forget what the rule is, but like the light falls off exponentially. I think by the square law of light. So the lights in the farther in the foreground are not going to be as prominent as a light that's closer to you. So this understanding how real light, real diffusion, how all that is interpreted for nighttime, I tried to kind of think about that and incorporate that to sell the illusion. So it's really just a magic trick, Some of these are, I'll say that this one probably didn't, as an example of how not to do day for night. This is where I kind of put it off to the side, but I still want to include it in the exhibit to kind of show what I had learned. Shooting day for night in a wooded scene, well, one, I would say like the actual photo, it actually looks darker. I think it's that the printer that I went with for this particular one, I'm not sure if they did a correction, but it actually looks brighter than in my actual edit. If you scan this, it looks a little bit different. But shooting trees or forest, it's something with high contrast in the background, it's almost impossible to kind of really sell the day for night. I suggest like something like this is real easy because these are hard edges, hard lines. It's easier to kind of select the sky and then bring those levels down. Whereas this right here is just this wooded area. It's just really, you can do it, but it's just really difficult to really sell the illusion. Yes, sir.
Roughly how many images go together to make one?
It all depends. Like this one took quite a bit. This was a little bit more of an intentionally planned. I actually worked with our own theater costume designer, Christy Railsback, to coordinate with the actors to kind of put this all together. So I knew kind of going into it that I would need a few plates for the different positions for the strobe, where the strobe would be. Obviously the less work, you actually have to, ideally you would want to kind of get it in one frame, because like, especially for motion picture, when you think about like if you intend to shoot a scene for motion picture day for night, it's going to be very, very difficult to deal with all these composited layers. So you want to kind of light everything in one scene with the ability to maybe just do like a sky replacement, you know? This was 2 exposures. I did take a lower exposure to kind of really darken the sky, instead of just using the day one here just for the foreground exposed with this blown out. I wouldn't say it's blown out, but the sky is very, very bright. It would be really difficult just kind of bring down the levels from that one image, because then you're really fighting the colors and the data that's in there. So you're going to introduce banding in there. So it's better if you just kind of take a separate photo, intentionally underexposed, so you can get that dark sky. You can kind of blend it in a lot easier. Trying to think. This was just one photograph. I was able to. This is one of the few exceptions. I took this probably about a year ago, and I was able to select the sky and then just make it darker. Actually, using filling in color to just not just kind of pulling the exposure down, because it would introduce banding. But it was these lines are clean enough to where I can actually kind of introduce my own sky into it. So if that makes sense. Good questions. Keep them coming. What else you got?
What program did you use to do most of the editing?
Sure. Like I use Adobe Lightroom at work as a raw editor and digital asset manager. Don't really use it as a digital asset manager at Newman, but at home I use a software called ACDC, which is a lot less popular, but I like the user interface. I don't like paying for subscriptions also, so when I need to upgrade, I just pay that one flat fee. And I think it does just as good as a job as Adobe can do. But Adobe is a little bit farther ahead when it comes to sky replacement and that kind of stuff, and these other things. So, and I try not to use AI just for the purpose of this study. I know that we can use it as a tool for like selection and stuff like that, but because ACDC doesn't have AI, selection, at least the older version that I had doesn't do that. So, and a lot of times it's just like, even then, when you kind of zoom into it, like I don't want to let AI tell me what it thinks should be a selection or not. So a lot of times I'm kind of zooming in and painting that mask, around to, expose the other layer of the sky that's behind it. Another thing is I'm not sure how many other people do photography in here are familiar with some of the processes. So you asked how many layers or how many photographs do I usually use to composite. What I found also is that when you're compositing the sky is to have that layer below everything. A lot of times, I was just trying to select the sky, and then for the masking, from a layer that was above everything, and that didn't work out, because I needed to maybe create a linear gradient in the foreground, but I couldn't do it because that sky was at the very, very top layer, so it didn't make sense. So keep those layers in your composite in order of the way that actually occurs visually. It's going to make your post-editing process a lot easier and more natural.